Good afternoon. We're all aware of the horrific event that occurred on Monday, where on Interstate 17, a suspect opened fire on several of our colleagues and other law enforcement agencies in an exchange of gunfire that ultimately led to his death and the injuries to several of the officers out there trying to protect the community. On Tuesday morning, I received a call advising me that the firearm that was used at the time of that shooting, as well as one additional firearm in the vehicle, were both firearms that were recovered that were stolen from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Immediately, I communicated with my colleagues, the Phoenix Police Department, the Mesa Police Department, and the Department of Public Safety, speaking with the chiefs and the colonel to first and foremost express my disappointment that any piece of equipment coming from this office would have jeopardized the safety of any law enforcement officer or member of our community. I also committed to open the doors of this office to ensure that a thorough investigation is conducted relative to how this individual came in possession of those weapons. We will work with ATF and the Phoenix Police Department, who are leading the investigation, to ensure that all the facts are determined and we understand how this occurred. But we do have information specific to these weapons regarding when they went missing from this office. And I want to start by saying that it was due to the initiation of employees in the organization who were assigned to the firearms detail, who recognized that the practices within the organization of how we issued, tracked, and recovered weapons was unacceptable. In late 2014-2015, the Firearms Division, working with Training Academy and Property and Evidence, initiated an audit to account for all the weapons in the organization. That investigation and that audit went on for the better part of a year, concluding in 2017, when I had taken this office. Upon taking this office, we forwarded a report to ATF listing 29 weapons that were unaccounted for and believed to be stolen from this office. Those weapons were last known to have been in the possession somewhere between the dates of 2010 and 2015. We could not confirm the last time they were actually documented in the possession of an employee within this organization. So again, these weapons were missing sometime between the time frame of 2010 and 2015. The audit took place in 2016, and a report was turned over to ATF to ensure that every weapon was logged into the system, into NCIC, so if they were recovered during the course of an investigation, that they would be tied back to this organization and we could determine how they came into possession of that person. Since that time, we have changed several policies within the organization to ensure that every weapon that arrives here is not only documented, but is put into the system so that we have both paper as well as technology working to keep records of all these things. Our employees are now required annually to bring all their county-issued firearms to the academy so that we can account for them and do an inspection of each firearm. I'm going to speak about some of the things that occurred in the past that led to this problem, just to ensure that there was clarity. In speaking with the employees who were involved in this audit and other parts of the organization, there was little at best oversight regarding the management of firearms that are distributed within this organization. Firearms were acquired, oftentimes in different divisions, and turned over directly to employees. There were times where weapons were kept in safes out of the districts to just be either signed out or taken out without any record. The same thing occurred relative to how they were returned or ever even accounted for. This went on for several years. So our ability to actually account for all the firearms, determine what employees were assigned those firearms or in possession of them, to ensure that we have records of where they are or were, was and continues to be somewhat difficult. Although now I would tell you, the men and women who headed up this audit and oversee those divisions have put together a very sophisticated system to ensure that we have accountability. Some of the policies that were changed Well, first and foremost, in the last budget cycle, I had put in a request to fund what is called the Quartermaster Program. It is a database to ensure that we can inventory every county item within this organization. That was approved by the Board of Supervisors. We've already initiated the training and the first stages in it, and we are in the process of acquisition. That occurred in the last budget cycle. All weapons upon receipt, after purchase, go to our property room now so that they can be inventoried. After they're inventoried and documented, they are assigned to individuals, not to areas. In the past, they were just assigned to areas with no individual accountability. As I said, the annual qualification, we confirm the possession of each one of those firearms that are county firearms tied to individuals within the organization. If the weapons are not present by that employee, they have 30 days to ensure that they bring that weapon so that there's a visual confirmation by a supervisor and it's documented. If not, then an investigation is conducted and discipline is delivered. We no longer allow for pool guns to be assigned in this organization as in the past. They must all be assigned to individuals. Every firearm that is acquired by this organization is logged on a report. In addition to the report, there is an ATF document attached to it, and it is filed in our database so that we have both paper as well as formal documentation. The policies pertaining to firearm possession in this organization and how we track and do everything to account for them has been updated several times, most recently just a few months ago, and continues to be in process. So I wanted to speak about the inception of why this problem occurred, just to give clarity to it, but I want to round back to where this started. Unfortunately, there are times when we see that law enforcement professionals leave their firearms in cars or in places where they're stolen, and we know that is unacceptable. They are disciplined and suspended when that occurs. But for an organization to have such a lack of discipline in accounting for their own firearms is unacceptable. And since taking this office, due to the initiation by employees who already existed here, we are doing everything with our powers to tighten up those rules to ensure that we have better oversight. That does not in any way, shape, or form excuse what happened. The fact that any dangerous individual in our community can acquire, possess, and use fully automatic weapons in our public, endangering the safety of our community, as well as engaging and threatening police officers, is unacceptable and intolerable. So as the sheriff, I will do everything within my powers to ensure that this does not happen, as long as it's things within our control. So again, I will express my apologies to the men and women of the other agencies whose lives were endangered, as well as their families, that this occurred. We'll continue to work with our staff to tighten up these rules to ensure that we do everything to prevent it from occurring, and we will work aggressively with ATF to determine how this individual came into possession of firearms that were the property of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and everyone, to include potential employees within this organization who may have been involved or responsible in any way, if it meets a criminal threshold, will be prosecuted. I'm happy to answer questions related to this. I will not speak of the investigation, which is headed up by ATF and the Phoenix Police Department. We work with them every day to find the facts within this case, and once we have more information, they will take the lead on delivering that information.
Sheriff, can you describe the kinds of weapons these were?
On the scene, or in totality, the ones I'm speaking of from the report?
On the scene.
Well, we know that one was a fully automatic weapon and the other one was also a long rifle.
Sheriff Penzone, you said that you learned about this situation involving this specific case on Tuesday, but you called this press conference here today. At what point were you planning on notifying the public? Did you decide to call this press conference today because ABC 15 was asking questions about this issue?
We say notifying the public in what context?
In terms of holding a press conference, letting people know that the guns that were used in this incident were stolen from MCSO.
I worked with those other agencies who are leading the investigation, and we didn't want to divulge this information so that we wouldn't diminish any potential leads. Knowing that now it was going public, we want to make sure there was clarity. But ultimately, every detailed investigation could undermine our ability to recover other weapons if they're out there, or possibly identify other suspects. So we wanted to keep this information as confidential as possible so that we could pursue all leads in the investigation. But once it becomes public, then obviously we want to make sure there's clarity in the details.
And having said that, have you determined who that weapon belongs to? And is that person still on the force here?
So those weapons, as I stated, were actually tied to what we would call pull weapons. So there were a lot of individuals who had access to them, and we're going through all the records to determine everyone and anyone who might have utilized them at any point if there is a record regarding a qualification or a sign-out form.
Sheriff, to be clear, these two weapons were part of the group of 29 that were unaccounted for?
Correct.
So that means there's 27 still at large?
Correct.
What types of weapons are those?
They're going to be long rifles and handguns.
Any more fully automatic weapons?
Yes, sir.
How many?
I don't know the exact number right now, and we'll speak with ATF regarding releasing additional details if they're comfortable with it, but there will be other weapons similar to these in that cache.
Did you say they were missing from 2010, sorry, between 2010 and 2015?
Excuse me?
These weapons were missing since like between 2010 and 2015?
Correct.
Okay.
Did you notify ATF after you received that audit specifically?
Yes, the report went to ATF in March of 2017. So that's when it was filed. They were put in NCIC. That was the completion of the investigation.
And because of that report, that's how these weapons were identified and traced back to the Sheriff's Department, is that right?
Correct. The serial numbers on the weapons immediately provided what we would call hits, showing where they were stolen from, where the report is.
This suspect from Monday, was it known that he was in possession of any of these weapons before the chase started, or were they discovered after it had ended?
To my knowledge, it was after it ended. I don't know any additional details regarding the investigation of that suspect, though.
Besides using services like NCIC, was there any other way that your office was looking for any of these missing weapons?
We actually did for the 2 years during the audit. They attempted to, and that's where I speak again about the fact there was so little information recording who took possession, who utilized those weapons when they were returned, that they conducted investigations during the course of that time to try to make determinations, and got to the point where all the information had been exhausted, and they were unable to identify or locate those.
Of the 29 and these two that you found, have you found any others?
I don't recall. I believe there may have been one other that was recovered in a different crime, not related to this, but I could be wrong on that, so forgive me, I'll have to look into it.
So you recovered one of these 29 weapons at another crime scene previously?
Again, I'm not clear on all the details, but to my recollection, there's one other firearm that has been recovered in a criminal case.
Do you know what year, what time
I don't
frame
have
it was?
information on that, or readily available right now. Sure, absolutely.
Either 26 or 27 still at large potentially.
Correct, yes. Several, too many. If one's out there, it's one too many.
What was your reaction when you found out that missing guns were used in this incident where it was fired upon other law enforcement?
Well, there's always disappointment, but I'm not going to. We're all responsible to ensure that we have great disciplines when you're the head of an organization. Do everything within your powers to ensure that every aspect of your responsibilities is done with public safety as the #1 priority. I took this office recognizing the challenges, so unfortunately I was disappointed yet not surprised because of some of those elements, but I will say that with a caveat. There will be a day when, you know, I'll stand here in front of you for a mistake that I've made or for a poor judgment, but in this case I will tell you that the lack of disciplines that occurred in this organization from leadership and the impact that it's had on the men and women is unforgivable, and this is an example of it, and we're trying our best to address these issues because the good men and women in this organization deserve better, and they deserve a reputation that reflects their efforts. So there's a lot of work still to be done.
Who in the organization initiated the initial audit? You weren't here yet, so who?
Correct. Yeah, it was actually a supervisor out at the firearms division who was newly assigned out there, and when he saw the issues of concern, he took the lead on actually initiating the audit and trying to redesign the system to have better accountability. And that's why I speak to him and his team. I don't want to mention him by name in this setting, but for he and his team, who have briefed me quite comprehensively, what they did that preceded the report that was issued in 27 speaks to their character as much as their commitment and their just their willingness to initiate something for the betterment of this organization.
So before that supervisor came forward and addressed maybe the need for this audit, there was no one that spoke up about any issues regarding to firearms that may be missing or the lack thereof of, as you said, a way to keep count and track these firearms? I
don't know that I could say that no one stepped up or expressed concern. I could just tell you that organizationally the practices were what they were, and they were not sufficient, and they were irresponsible, and because of his position and his willingness to initiate, it really was the first step from my perspective, what I'm seeing. There had been audits in the past, I want to say 5 or 10 years prior to that, but nothing to the level of sophistication and documentation of what went on.
Do you think this goes all the way up to the top
The top of,
of the chain, the former sheriff or Kyle?
well, at the end of the day, as I stand here in front of you, everything that's occurring right now comes up to the top. So, you know, I own this organization, I own the responsibilities for it, and, you know, that's the case in every organization, so.
Since you've started your new policies of keeping track of weapons, have you had any deputies come up with weapons missing?
We have, yes. There have been times when, and again, we'll have to get a number for you, but there are times when, as I spoke of earlier, employees leave their weapons in their cars, and their cars are burglarized, and those go missing, in which case a criminal report is filed, and an internal investigation is conducted, and it leads to a suspension.
Will we be able to get a total of those weapons?
Yeah, that's public information. We can absolutely. All right. Obviously, you've exhausted your questions, and I appreciate your time. This is a disappointing moment that we need to address and overcome. We are going to work with all those other agencies to do everything we can to identify who's responsible. And as I said, if within the organization anyone has been involved in something that reaches the level of criminal act, they will be prosecuted. But thank you for your time.